Thanks for tuning in to Kentucky Running, brought to you by John's Run Walk Shop in Lexington. I'm Matt Reno, and today we're talking ultra running, any distance longer than a marathon. It's not for everyone, myself included, but I do find it fascinating to hear from people who enjoy pushing themselves to cover that much ground at once. In this episode, I'm talking with Frank Howatt, who will share some of his experiences and give you an idea of what to expect if you're considering getting into ultras. Frank is also proof that it's never too late to start. He didn't begin ultra running until he was 50. Stick around, we've got a lot of great advice in this conversation. By the way, if you're looking for an ultra this fall, check out the Moonbow Ultra, happening in Corbin on November 9th. We've got 3 distance options, the longest being 50K, but you can also run 30K or 10K. Whatever you choose, you're in for some amazing scenery. The course takes runners along the Sheltowee Trace Trail and ends at the base of the incredible Cumberland Falls, nicknamed the Niagara of the South. Learn more about the Moonbow Ultra at the races page of johnsrunwalkshop.com. Before we get to our chat with Frank Howatt, let's do some quick tech talk. Our Ultra rep, Jordan Chance, is back to cover the new Experience line of shoes. Let's learn more right now. Jordan, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I am so excited to be here and talk about the Experience line. It has been doing really, really well for us. And I think it's been selling really great here at John's as well. And just can't wait to share some more information about that with you guys. Yeah,
these shoes are great. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Experience line is in general, and then we'll get into the details about each of the shoes.
So this past October, so almost a year ago, we released our first 4mm drop shoe called the Forward Experience. That was a road shoe with the 4mm drop, and it did really, really well for us, enough to where we wanted to introduce some new shoes to the line. So this May 2024, we came out with 3 new options. We rebranded the Forward Experience into the Experience Flow. We added the Experience Form, which is a stability shoe, and then we added the Experience Wild, which is the trail shoe. So all of these have a 4mm drop. They're all super lightweight. They have a geometry bottom, so they're kind of a rocker shape. They're going to roll really well with your body, whether you're running fast, whether you're running slow. It can really work for anyone out on the market. So they've just been doing really well for us, and we've absolutely loved having them in the lineup.
All right, well, let's start talking about the neutral shoe, the Experience Flow. And this, I have it myself. This is in my running rotation right now after I had to retire my Torrens because I pushed those to the end. I was getting some holes in them, so I was like, okay, they're done. But right on time, I got the Experience Flow, and I've been loving it. So tell us what that one's all about.
Yeah, so like I said, the Experience Flow is going to also have that 4mm drop to it. It's very lightweight. It's a really responsive shoe. It has a compression molded EVA foam for the midsole, so it works really well under the foot. Like I was saying, pick up the pace in it really well. You can also go pretty slow. It's a really good daily trainer. We've got a lot of people who wear it just casually, so it's very versatile, can work for a ton of different people regardless of what you're doing. It still has Ultra's signature foot shape fit, so it's going to be the standard foot shape, which provides tons of toe space for you, but it's also going to lock down in the midfoot and the heel. So really secure, but just allows for full range of motion with the toes. That's the rundown of the Experience Flow.
And you said there's one for people who need more stability. Which one is that?
Yeah, so that is the Experience Form, and it's almost going to be identical to the Flow, but it does have guide rail stability. So what that means is you think about bumpers in a bowling alley. So as your foot goes to move around, it's just going to keep that foot centered, just like the bumpers would keep a ball centered in bowling. So it's very similar to that Experience Flow. It just has that stability option to it for people who might have a little bit of pronation or supination issues.
And last but not least, we've got a trail shoe, which is in the Experience line. Again, the 4mm drop. Tell us about the Experience Wild.
Experience Wild is going to fit very similarly to the road shoes that we offer, but obviously it's going to be a trail shoe. So it works really well as a hybrid, which means you can use it on the road, but it's going to perform the best on the trails. It has a Max Track outsole to it, which is just a blend from Ultra that is really sticky, really grippy. It's going to give you a lot of traction on the trails. Super lightweight. It's really responsive. Like I was saying, similar to the road options that we have. It has that low drop to it. Has a really nice upper. Comes in some really great colors. We love it.
And listeners, you will get a chance to try on a pair of Experience Wild, if you haven't already, during the Kentucky Trail Run series, the last Sunday of every month through October. And Jordan is going to be at the October event as we cap things off with a demo of the Experience Wild. Plus, we've got giveaways, including 2 pairs of Ultra shoes and a trail gaiter. And you can get all the details on this at the events page of johnsrunwalkshop.com. Jordan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Great having you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope I see a lot of you listeners out there at the end of October.
Today we're talking to Frank Howatt of Georgetown. He is an ultra runner. Frank, how did you initially get involved with ultra running? Because for me personally, I did 2 marathons and that was enough to know that is beyond my limit. I stick to halves now. But what made you say 26.2? That's a nice warm up.
Oh, that's tough. I have always been interested in the outdoors. I love being on hiking trails, and ultras happen on hiking trails. I had spent my life on trails, also spent my life as a runner. A buddy of mine kept trying to get me to do ultras, and my interest was really in getting out on the trails. And I thought, well, I'll dabble. I'll get out there and I'll do one. And for the very same reason that people are hesitant to take a jump to an ultra, that's sort of what pulls people to it. It's just the allure of trying something a little bigger. I thought I would dabble. I thought I would do one and call it quits. But once I went that direction, I kind of never looked back. I just jumped all in, and I've been doing ultras ever since.
What was the first one you did?
My wife and I were talking about this last night because I wasn't entirely confident, but there was, and I don't think they do it anymore, but there was a 50K in Shaker Village, and I had signed up for Big Turtle, which was a 50-miler on Sheltowee Trace. And I wanted something that gave me a little bit of experience before I got on those hiking trails and those hills. So I did this 50K, and it was just about enough to dissuade me. I mean, it kind of kicked my butt. But that was the one, and that was about 10 years ago. And it's worth stating that that first one was at the age of 50. So I'm a little late transitioning into the sport.
Yeah, but you're not the only person we know who got into ultra running later than most people, so around 50 or so. It shows that it's not something that is too late to start doing, but how do you maintain fitness and stay injury-free as you age?
You know, that is an interesting point that you make. It is a sport that is a little kinder to old folks because we can hang on to our endurance. It's really that peak performance that starts to wane. And honestly, you know, I guess one of my motivations was that I realized I wasn't getting any faster and I wasn't going to get any faster. And so I thought, well, let's go a little farther. I started going farther and then going farther, and I looked around, and you're absolutely right. There's a lot of folks that were my age. Now, I mean, 10 years later, I'm starting to get into a little bit more rarefied of a club. There's a lot fewer. There's always a handful in their early 60s, but anymore, I get to podium if I show up. The other thing I would say is this isn't scientifically based. This is my own anecdotes, which is all I can really speak for, but I think it's really healthier than road running, other than the obvious peril of falling and landing on your face, which everyone's going to take some falls, but it's a little softer landing. You have more lateral movement. You vary your pace. You vary your direction a little more. You go up, you go down. It's not the repetitive nature of road running, nor is it the constant hard surface. So even though you're going to go a little slower and that surface is going to sap your energy a little bit, I think overall it's a little kinder as you age.
Do you have a favorite distance, or do you have a favorite race that you've done?
You know, the portfolio of races roughly runs from the 50K. If you're ready for a marathon, then you're ready for a 50K. It's 5 more miles, and those aren't throwaway miles, but you can knock that out. And I enjoy those because you can run that, and then you still have some ability to live through the rest of your day. 50-miler tends to be the next jump up, depending on the race. That might be a 12-hour effort. That kind of finishes you off, and I really enjoy that. And then the next jump up is the 100K, which is 62 miles, obviously, if you do the math. then the 100-miler. And for a while, it was very popular to say the 100-miler is the new 26.2. Beyond 100-miler is the 200-miler and even beyond that. So your core question was, what was my favorite? And I've got to say, each of those distances, there is an appeal. The 200s I've done, there's just no comparison. If I'm pressed to identify what was most meaningful and my favorite, I'd have to say those 200s just because they're an epic experience. But I mean, day in, day out, a 50-miler is a great race, and I would do those 6 times a year if I could.
And which 200-milers did you do? And also, how long did they take?
Oh, all right. Now we're getting into the fun. I did the Moab 240, which is not a 200. It's a 240. And it's kind of funny because that extra 40 sounds like a toss-away ad. But that was, another 12 hours of effort. And that Moab basically goes around Moab, Utah. Several mountain ranges you're going up over, desert floor up to 9, 10, 11,000 feet. So you end up with great temperature variation. That one I had hoped to beat 100 hours. The clock never stops. You've got to get some sleep, but you just catch really short cat naps. Everybody ends up with challenges that they didn't expect. I ended up with what's called a runner's lean. And I ended up, it took me 110 hours, which was not a good performance, but it was memorable for me because it required me to kind of gut it out. Now, the next one I did was Tahoe 200. A lot more climbing to that one, but I did that one just this last June, and it was very successful. I had a good day. That one, it's more than a day, but but that one I did in 88 hours, which put me almost dead center of the finishers. So for an old guy, I thought that was a good finish, 88 hours.
And what is a runner's lean?
A lot of your listeners who have been out at longer races have seen this happen. From my understanding, happens more with older people than younger people, happens more with men than women, but it can happen to anybody. Evidently, it's triggered by some imbalance to the left or the right of your body. And as you're running, you end up leaning to one side. The lean itself doesn't put you in any peril. I mean, it's not an injury. Typically, you get one good night of sleep and it resolves. The problem was it happened to me at about mile 100. Never happened to me before, never since. At mile 100, I had another 140 miles to go. And for 50, 60 miles, I barely even noticed it. But then I got to the point where it was really quite painful. It got to the point where the back of the pack people were catching up and jotting down my bib number because they assumed they had to send rescue out for me. Wow. But I gritted it out. Really, thanks to a lot of support, great people, volunteers at the races, and then the folks that were crewing me were just fantastic, and they got me through it.
Okay, good. And I know you have some other pretty wild stories about things that have happened on the trails. You want to talk about the more memorable things? Last time we were talking about this, you mentioned hallucinations.
Yeah, thankfully, anybody who does 100-milers, if you've done enough of them, you end up with some periods of hallucination. And I've kind of, and this is entirely Frank Howatt speaking, this isn't any scientific treatise. I think you got the level 1 experience where your brain is just fatigued and it's misinterpreting what you're taking in through your senses, and you think you see a person when you see a rock or a tree. Not a big deal. But then you get to the next level where really you're seeing things that aren't there. And then I got to what I call a level 3, which was just a break from reality. I mean, and this happened to me at Moab, actually, because I was just, in order to stay ahead of the cutoffs, I was just way too sleep deprived. And I got to a point late at night, way up on a mountainside, where I didn't know who I was or where I was from. And I had a pacer with me, and I turned to this guy and actually asked him if he was real. It was a crazy experience. Tahoe, that wasn't the case because I was doing well enough that I was getting enough sleep. Certainly it wouldn't be anything that people would characterize as a good night's sleep. I'd get 90 minutes about every 20 hours or so. That was enough. It's surprising that a 90-minute, sometimes a 20-minute nap just along the side of the trail will reset you, and you're good to go for another 8 to 10 hours.
That is incredible. How do you prepare yourself both physically and mentally for a challenge like this?
So there's limits to what you can ask your body physiologically to do. This is me talking. I'm sure there's coaches out there that might disagree, but if you get yourself prepared for a challenging 100, you've done the training you need to do to be successful in a 200 miler. One of the medics at one of the 200 milers commented to me, and it seems to be sort of a mantra that they repeat often, is that the 200-mile distance is a challenge from the neck up and the ankles down, which really what he was saying by that was that assuming your fitness is where it needs to be, it's a mental game. You just have to know how to gut it out. I always tell people, I don't quit races, and it's not because I'm tougher than anybody. I always tell people it's just because I lack imagination. I think a lot of people, they get out there and they start imagining what that nice cold beer is going to be like or what that slice of pizza, and I'm just out there, and I just go until they tell me to stop. So there's the mental game, and then your body takes some heat, takes some damage. Feet just really get pretty torn up. There's a book called Fixing Your Feet. Don't have the author's name off the top of my head, but it's become almost a Bible to some folks. It's a great resource for prevention and after the fact for care of the feet once you've really beaten yourself up. So taking care of that kind of stuff. And then, the other challenges of the really big distances is logistics. You heard me just mention that in those really long distances, those 200s, you end up with such a variety of altitudes of weather, and just getting yourself prepared for all of that, making sure you're geared for it, making sure your crew, if you have crew, are prepared to support you in the way that you need. It becomes logistically challenging. Get the foundation of the running done, get your brain right, find joy in it, because if you start going down that deep, dark road in your brain, that's where the wheels really fall off. And just keep moving.
That's great advice. And I looked that up while you were talking, Fixing Your Feet by John Von Hoff. You mentioned pizza and beer. Let's talk about nutrition a bit, because it seems like just about every time I see you, we're at a brewery. So is beer an essential part of nutrition for ultra running, or what does your diet consist of?
Yeah, Matt, it actually is. I've got to have something to look forward to at the end, and I don't allow myself to have food fantasies until I'm really pretty close to the finish. I've got to be about an hour or so from the finish before I will allow myself to start thinking that way, because it's brutal to start thinking about what you could have. Yeah, during the race, a lot of carbohydrate, making sure you're taking care of salt needs. Things that are only slightly sweet, as you progress through the race, it gets more and more difficult to take in the sweet stuff like the gels and so forth. So what I found is that I try to eat solid food for as long as I can, but you get to the point where you're just not producing any saliva. You can't break food. You don't have the amylase in your mouth. You can wet stuff, but you're just not breaking it down in your mouth. So it gets really difficult to consume any food. Even at the end, you might have big ideas about how much you want to eat, but it becomes difficult. So really disciplining yourself to continue to take in food. And I know, like on a road race, if you're eating goose, they'll tell you to take that 100 calories every 40, 45 minutes or so. I find that in an ultra, like in the 200 milers, I was making sure I was taking in a couple hundred calories of carbohydrate about every hour and a half. And thankfully, I got to the point where that really seemed too often. I really didn't want to do it, but my pacers that were with me were pretty pushy about it, and they kept my nutrition needs met. But it is one of the challenges. You end up with the gastric issues. You end up not being able to consume food. But yeah, I will go on record really recommending beer and pizza.
Okay, well, now you're making me want to do this. And let's talk about time. How much time do you spend running every week, or is there any cross training? And how do you fit it into a schedule when you also have a job and family? And how do you keep all that balanced?
Well, everyone will give you the good advice of having balance. I might prioritize running more than is healthy and more that is right. I will tell you, there's a lot of projects around the house that get put on a back burner, because it's not only the time that you're running, but once you're running 10 ultras a year, 12 ultras a year, you're either training all the time, you're traveling, or you're recovering. I mean, if I'm out doing hill repeats for 6 hours on a Saturday, it's really hard to come home and fix the dryer. So it does have a cost. I will tell you that you can access ultras and you can access trail running without following my example. Talk to me, you're going to hear about longer races, but folks should feel good and comfortable about jumping in at shorter distances. I mean, it's really about getting out there, getting in the woods, getting to be a part of that community. As far as what I commit to running, I don't typically trail run during the week just because in order to have some efficiency, I need to step out my front door and run. I need to get that running time done. I run more than most people I know, but a whole lot less than a lot of the ultra people that I read about. So my monthly average is I typically fall somewhere between 200 and 250 miles a month. This morning is about as far as I'll run during the week, and I ran about 12 and a half miles this morning. But that's on the high side. And then the weekend is where I'll really pack it in, and that's where I'll get out on trail. Again, I talk about hill repeats. Last Saturday, I was out doing hill repeats for 4.5 hours. I've got a route that's about a mile to the summit. It's about 600 feet. Get to the top. You congratulate yourself, you come back down, and you repeat. And you do that until you've done all that you set out to do. And I'll be out there again this week. So weekends is where you really accumulate that. A lot of back-to-back so that you're not really killing yourself in one day. You get those back-to-back long runs so that you've got less opportunity for injury. You challenge yourself on Saturday, and then you get back out there again on Sunday.
Okay, great. What's some of your go-to gear, your favorite shoes, other essential things to have with you out there?
So I bounce around a good bit. There's a lot of folks that will talk gear ad nauseum, and I'm just not one of those guys. Typically, you'll see ultra runners with a hydration pack. I've gone through various styles, various brands. Yeah, find something that works for you. That's kind of essential gear, is having a hydration pack. With the exceptionally long runs, I need something like a slack pack that's got a little bit more cargo carrying capacity. Sometimes I'll have a waist belt with bottles. One of them would have hydration, the other water. Always make sure I've got more calories than I believe I will take, because that will end your run if you end up bonking because you don't have enough calories. I always have a buffer too, regardless of the year. I mean, in the wintertime, it's keeping me warm. In the summertime, it's keeping the sweat off me. So as far as shoes go, I run in Speed Goat now. It took me a while to find them. I've got kind of funky feet. They're just really fat. And there's not as many options for us fat-footed friends. I vary quite a bit with socks. You'll hear some people really committed. They like the toe socks. They like this sock, that sock. I get a variety, just whatever seems to be working for me at the time. And then the other issue I always deal with is that my hands get super, super cold almost all year. So I've typically got gloves with me.
Yeah, my feet are not only wide, but they're short too. So finding shoes has been a challenge my whole life. So that's why I finally found the perfect job working at a shoe store. What advice would you give someone getting into ultra running and struggling to stay motivated?
First, make sure that it's the right sport for you. If it doesn't bring you joy, I'm somebody who loves being out in nature, loves being on trail. So that's enough of a joy trigger for me. I also love the community. There are a lot of people that don't need to race. They can go out and just enjoy the trail, just enjoy the road. For me, I find that events keep my motivation up. So I do a lot of racing. I don't know that everybody has to do a race a month, but 3, 4, 5, 6 races a year lets you jump into the community. These races are great because they're supported, so you can go a little further and know that there's aid stations along the way. Goal setting is awesome. Go a little faster or go a little farther. We tend to be motivated by improvement, whereas motivation lags when our performance stagnates. So it's okay to reach for that next challenge. But, you gotta find joy in it. And a big part of it is the community.
Good. And what's next on your race calendar?
So in October, it's kind of an inside joke. I've got No Business scheduled. That's down in the Tennessee area. Beautiful, beautiful race that I have never done. It's a 100-miler. Every year, it's the race I'm going to do. And every year, for some reason, I don't get around to it. So by gosh, this is the year for No Business. And what that means is I've got to do it for 2 years, because what they do is it's a loop, 100-mile loop. And what they do is they go in one direction one year, and then in the next year, they go the opposite direction. So once you've gone both directions, you qualify for a two-direction buckle. So you get your finisher buckle, and then you get your two-directional buckle. I know that's it's a marketing ploy, right? You business people understand that.
It works. It works. It's genius. Love those buckles. Last question before I let you go. I can't imagine anyone would engage in a sport like this without learning something about themselves or about life in general. So what have your ultra running experiences taught you?
I think maybe we're getting to the meat of it here. I think a lot of us go through life, and I think of, how you interact with your family, how you interact at work. And I'll speak of my own experience, and I think it relates to other people's experience as well. I'm never convinced that I'm not just faking it. At work, do I really know what I'm doing, or have I just gotten away with it for a long time? I don't know. But what's nice about ultras, and I think this translates to your Saturday 5Ks as well, right? I mean, whatever you're doing, you either do it or you don't. There is no question of whether or not you're faking it. The other bells that kind of rings for me, it's really, as the distances get further, I always caution people, by the way, be careful talking to ultra runners and taking their advice. I mean, people are full of a lot of good information, but everyone is just reporting their anecdotes. Certainly have your ears open to what you hear, but from what you hear from me included, you've got to experience it for yourself and see what works, because a lot of us are talking trash 90% of the time. But, there's a lot of fun in doing a huge distance and then telling people about it and seeing their eyes go wide. But that can't be why you're doing it. After my first 200, I had a lot of people say to me, wow, you must really be proud of it. And I didn't have the language for it. And so I was saying, yeah, I'm proud of it. I'm happy. It took me a little while to realize that it wasn't pride. It wasn't hubris. It was just a deep sense of satisfaction that I haven't found in anything else. Walking down the street after knocking out a 200-miler just was profoundly satisfying. And I think that is my takeaway experience.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed hearing about all of this, Frank, and I think our listeners who are interested in getting into ultra running got some good advice from you today too. And of course, like you said, your advice, your own experiences. So they've got to see what works for them. But yeah, really appreciate you being on the show today.
Really happy to be here. Just there's resources online. The first hurdle is to just get out in the woods with some other people. Once you do that, you'll find the races and you'll find the crew. So get out there. Thanks for having me.
I had a great time learning more about ultra running with Frank. Hope you did too. I think I'll stick with half marathons, but I do love hearing stories from those who push themselves to cover such incredible amounts of ground. Again, if you're looking to push yourself on the beautiful Sheltowee Trace Trail, sign up for the Moonbow Ultra happening November 9th. Find details at the races page of johnsrunwalkshop.com. I'm Matt Reno. Thank you for tuning in. Please leave a rating and review and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to help others find the show. We'll talk again soon on Kentucky Running.